Well, today we can see yet more revelations of real questions about integrity of some politicians. What we see is the efficiency of having an integrity and an anti-corruption body. For these issues in Victoria, they can be immediately reported to IBAC and investigated. Federally, we have nothing. So the skeletons in the closet of the major parties really indicates we absolutely need a national integrity commission with teeth.
These latest texts that have come out this morning appear to be largely about internal party electioneering, as opposed to, say, a ministerial decision-making body. How would that be? How would they be covered by a federal integrity commission, something like that?
Well, again, it depends on what has flowed on from those texts. I agree, they do appear to be internal, but the question is, we have filming inside of, without the knowledge of people, inside a Member of Parliament suite. We clearly have some questions around trying to influence politics and influence government, and this is the very reason why it needs to be investigated. At the moment, the Australian people rely on the media, and I must say the media does a good job of it, but relies on the media to investigate these matters, and they can't be done. I don't think that can be done as thoroughly as through an integrity commission.
Zali, is this, how's the public reflect on all stuff? Trusting politicians in general, it reflects on everyone, doesn't it? It reflects on you and the whole bit.
This reflects really poorly on politicians, on governance, and in trust in politics. It is an issue that comes up a lot. Since my transition from private life to being a politician and representing Warringah, trust in politicians is a massive issue that people raise constantly. There is very little trust. There's a very high level of cynicism about what is presumed to go on down here. And I think this needs to be fixed. For us to have a strong democracy, we need to have the Australian people trusting in our systems of government, trusting in how decisions are made, making sure that public money is allocated for public good. And this is where we come back to questions of transparency. When it comes to the NCCC, when it comes to any kind of body that is implemented that will advise government or make recommendations in relation to spending of public money, it must be done with proper governance.
Integrity Commission, I think most people agree it's a good idea, but I think there's probably some people that are scared the idea that with ICAC in New South Wales. Sure, you guys be kind of like really articulating exactly the formation of what it actually means.
Well, again, there's been a lot of misdirection in relation to what the proposed model of the National Integrity Commission in the bill that's passed the Senate will do. It is in fact the best of all the models we have around the states in Australia. It is not just a New South Wales ICAC model. It takes on board the elements of IBAC in Victoria, it takes on board the elements of Queensland. It is actually the best of all models. So no, this is not a trial by media, it's not a trial by sort of an open court witch hunt kind of thing, which a lot of people allege about the New South Wales ICAC. This is a body that will absolutely represent public interest and ensure that there is proper investigation of matters. When we call for them to be public hearings, it is once there is a matter of significant that meets a threshold that has sufficient evidence to establish wrongdoing, then it can be public. This should not be behind closed doors. Politicians should not be held to a different standard to what Australian people are.
And who would decide what cases the new body would actually investigate? Who gives a decision and what's the oversight of the Integrity Commission itself? Who oversees?
Well, of course, the appointment, when it comes to the members of a commission, we would look to the more senior members of the judiciary. You would look to the members that would know how to have that independence and apply that integrity. This is done all the time when it comes to establishing commissions. And again, the bill proposed and passed in the Senate has already reflected the best of the models around all of our states and territories. Well, we will keep, we certainly won't be letting up on this issue. The Australian public wants it. Over 80% of Australian people have indicated they want a National Integrity Anti-Corruption Commission. I think the government needs to be very aware of that and needs to implement it. It was an election promise by the Morrison government to implement a National Integrity Commission. The Attorney-General has indicated he's still working on his model. He's indicated he's delaying the presentation of legislation because of the coronavirus. Yet, I think quite ironically, the government has had time to present legislation that seeks to introduce or to have a flow of donations that are prohibited at state level but permitted at federal level flow back to state branches of political parties. So I think the irony should not be lost on the Australian people that the government has had time for that legislation but not time to introduce the National Integrity Commission.
It's kind of sad that we possibly might need this commission, I guess. And, are the wrong people in power? I mean, are people voting in the wrong people on this so-called trust that they...
Well, what it raises is an interesting question of does the layer of political parties corrupt I think the integrity of a member of parliament and get in the way of that duty to represent your electorate. I find it quite interesting the comparison to as a barrister, you represent your client in court, but at all times you're an officer of the court. So your primary duty is to the court to ensure that you always uphold the importance and the integrity of the court and the judicial system. I find, interestingly enough, as a Member of Parliament, there is no such requirement. There are no ethical rules around members of Parliament. There is no code of practice. We have standing orders, but nothing like what, for example, barristers have in court that really puts the rules around the kind of conduct and the ethical rules we must comply with as members of Parliament. Of course, ministers have ministerial standards, but again, there is very little when it comes to holding it all to account. Absolutely. I absolutely believe we should have a professional code of conduct for members of Parliament.
Would that mean that the people who break that code get expelled from Parliament? That if they lose their seat, they lose the privilege of actually serving the court?
Well, I think, again, it has to go through a process, so such as barristers go through a professional review conduct committee and it gets assessed, and that is where a National Integrity Commission would come to play in reviewing breaches of conduct.
Because I think most Australian people read what they're this morning about that whatever, there's a lack of ethics.
Yes.
Completely.
Yeah, I think what these events raise concern for the Australian public, as well as I think there's been, I think we have to be real here, there's been events from all sides of politics that it does raise questions of integrity and ethics when it comes to conduct here in Parliament by politicians, but also advisors. We are talking about a lot of people having access to a lot of influence. A lot of public money gets allocated, and with that comes a risk of corruption, comes a risk of slipping integrity and ethics as to how things are done. And if we want to restore trust in our government, it requires an integrity commission, but I think it also requires a code of conduct when it comes to members of Parliament. Well, unfortunately, I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's one and the other that we need. In terms of the major parties, look, we have a commitment at the election by the Morrison government, so I think that is something that the Australian public do want, and so we'll keep requiring that to be delivered. When it comes to, look, the Labor Party, whilst they did not do it while they were in power, they have supported the National Integrity Commission model proposed by the previous member for Indi, Cathy McGowan, and the Greens. That's passed the Senate with the support of Labor. So to their credit, they have supported the National Integrity Commission model that is on the table. The only people holding out at this point is the coalition.
So speaking of ethics, I was talking to Katie Gallagher, and she said the ACT government used to have an ethics advisor, like from the university, a professor and that sort of stuff, to help the minister. Is that something that could be utilised in this building, do you think?
I think, of course, when it comes to ethics, it can be from the academic side. That is a model that could be looked at. It's something that has been looked at over the years, and it's something that's being worked on to introduce again. I do believe we need to raise the standards.